We spend just a massive amount of our lives trying to fix our pain.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, we read the books, we analyze our childhoods, we build these like incredibly complex daily routines for the sole purpose of avoiding feeling bad.
Yeah, it's like emotional pain becomes the structural flaw in the foundation of a house.
Right. It becomes the ultimate enemy, the thing that, must be eradicated or medicated or just paved over before we can actually start living our real lives.
Exactly. But the text we're looking at for this deep dive makes a claim that just completely inverts that entire worldview.
It really does. So today we are exploring an excerpted text that delves into the mechanics of emotional pain, trauma, and somatic processing.
Hmm.
And the central thesis here is just a total paradigm shift.
It's fascinating.
It says the pain is not the problem. The avoidance of the pain is the problem.
Yeah, which is a huge reframing.
It is. And for you listening right now, the mission of this deep dive is to decode exactly how our bodies store these unprocessed experiences. We want to unpack why we spend so much of our life force energy avoiding them and, how finally turning around to face them unlocks not just healing, but like a much truer, more capable version of ourselves.
Right. It's a profound shift in how we view our own heavy feelings. Because the source material suggests that so much of what we consider to be our fixed personality traits or distinct preferences.
Wait, like our actual
Yeah,
personality?
exactly. Like those traits might actually just be highly sophisticated avoidance strategies.
What?
I know, right? The things we think make us who we are, like a relentless drive to be productive, or a tendency to withdraw when things get loud, or, specific aversions to certain types of conversations.
Oh, it's just say, oh, that's just how I am.
Exactly. But it might just be our nervous system carefully routing us around an unfelt pain. We're navigating this map where certain territories are entirely off limits, and we've just convinced ourselves we don't like those areas.
That is so wild. So to understand how we end up with this restricted map and why we avoid the pain so brilliantly, we really need to look at how that...
It's crucial.
Right, because we hear that word tossed around constantly today, and the definition in the source material really challenges the colloquial way we usually use it.
It does. The word has been stretched so far in contemporary discourse that it's often dismissed entirely, or it's used so selectively that people exclude their own suffering, assuming their experience just, wasn't severe enough to qualify.
Yeah, I've definitely heard people say that, like, oh, I don't have real trauma.
Right. And both of those extremes stem from a fundamental misunderstanding of the biology. The text defines it with absolute clarity. It says trauma is not the event itself. Trauma is the incomplete response to the event.
The incomplete response.
Yeah.
That places the focus entirely on the aftermath, right? Like on the body's mechanics rather than the external narrative of what actually happened.
Exactly. As the source reminds us, if we look at baseline mammalian biology, the animal body knows exactly how to process fear and threat naturally.
Right, like in the wild.
Yeah, when an animal survives a chase in the wild, you'll see it physically shake and tremble.
Oh yeah, like a dog shaking it off.
Precisely. And that isn't a sign of weakness or shock. That is a biological completion cycle. It's discharging that massive spike of survival activation, metabolizing the fear, and basically resetting the nervous system so it can go back to grazing.
Right.
But human beings are unique in our biological architecture. We possess this massive cognitive capacity, and we use our higher brain functions to actually interrupt that natural biological completion cycle.
So we basically use our prefrontal cortex to hit the brakes on our own limbic system.
Yes.
We think about how we look or what the social expectations of the room are.
We literally think our way into not feeling. We shame ourselves into stillness because, crying is culturally coded as weak. Or we absorb ambient messages that anger isn't acceptable in our social class. Or that grief needs to be wrapped up neatly after, 3 days of bereavement leave.
Right, you have to get right back to work.
Exactly. And our brilliant nervous systems want to keep us socially safe because for humans, social belonging is a survival imperative.
So the body just complies.
It complies, the feeling is suppressed before it finishes moving, so the experience doesn't get integrated into the past.
It just gets stuck.
Yeah, it gets stored in the present tense, in the physical tissue, in the chronic tension of the jaw, in a perpetually hardened belly or shallow breathing patterns. The body basically holds what the conscious mind refuses to feel.
I was trying to picture the mechanics of this while I was going through the source material, and here's the analogy that kind of came to mind.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's like you're watching a terrifying horror movie, And right during the absolute worst, most suspenseful jump scare scene, you just hit pause.
Oh.
And then you just leave the room. But the scary moment doesn't go away. It just stays frozen on the screen of your body, glaring at you in the background while you try to go about your daily life, just pretending the TV isn't on.
That captures the suspended state perfectly. The threat is paused, but the physiological anticipation of the threat is actively maintained.
Wow. No.
And if we look at the ongoing cost of walking around with that paused screen, we really have to consider the toll of having that frozen, suppressed energy running in the background of your operating system for years or even decades.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Now, avoidance is an incredibly intelligent survival strategy, especially in childhood. Like, if your environment is unsafe or if the adults around you lack the capacity to tolerate your distress, shutting down your feelings is adaptive.
It keeps you intact.
Exactly.
It's a brilliant localized solution to a temporary problem. But the issue the text highlights is that these protective patterns don't automatically dissolve just because you grow up and the original threat leaves.
Right. No, they don't. Your nervous system stays locked in that configuration that kept you alive. What was once a life-saving adaptation basically calcifies into a cage.
And the text details the comprehensive costs of this state of, not feeling. It really cascades through every layer of a person's life, starting with the emotional cost.
Right, and the emotional cost reveals a really difficult truth about human neurobiology, which is that you cannot selectively numb.
Wait, you can't?
No. The source points out that if you build a wall to defend against your sorrow, you have simultaneously created a ceiling for your joy.
Oh, wow. So it just caps everything.
Exactly. The same circuitry in the body that processes grief is the exact same circuitry that processes delight. There is no biological mechanism that allows you to, surgically remove pain while leaving happiness totally intact.
That makes so much sense, but it's terrifying.
Yeah, if you don't allow yourself to feel the crushing depths of despair, you physically cannot feel the soaring heights of joy. You either block the flow of sensation or you don't.
So if you're clamping down on that emotional circuitry, that energy doesn't just evaporate. It has mass. It requires containment, which pushes this directly into the somatic cost.
Right.
Unprocessed pain becomes physical reality.
The body has to physically armor itself to keep the emotion suppressed. And this manifests as chronic muscular tension, mysterious systemic inflammation, and a nervous system that is trapped in a state where you're simultaneously wired and tired.
Wired and tired. I feel like everyone listening knows exactly what that feels like.
Oh, absolutely. You experience this profound cellular exhaustion that a good night's sleep just simply cannot fix because your body is perpetually burning metabolic energy to manage that pause jump scare beneath the surface.
You're constantly hitting the gas and the brake at the exact same time.
Yes.
And when you're walking around in that hypervigilant, exhausted state, it inevitably overflows into the relational cost. This is the part of the text that really made me pause.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Whatever we haven't processed internally, we end up projecting outward onto the people around us. Our unfelt, unfinished business basically gets dressed up in the costume of the present moment.
The traumatized nervous system is essentially a compromised lens. It scans the environment for threats based on old data. So, your unacknowledged grief becomes a heightened sensitivity where you read abandonment into a perfectly neutral text message from a friend.
Oh, I've definitely done that.
Right. Or your unfelt shame dictates how you interpret just a passing glance from your partner. In those moments, you aren't actually responding to the person in front of you. You are reacting to your own frozen history.
You're demanding that your current relationships manage the ghosts of your past.
Precisely.
It creates this impossible dynamic where you're constantly fighting shadows. And when you combine the emotional capping, the physical exhaustion, and the relational conflict, it inevitably leads to the fourth cost, which the text calls the spiritual cost.
Yes.
Describes it as a pervasive flatness to experience.
It is the tragedy of an unlived life. You are not fully inhabiting your own existence because you have cordoned off massive sections of your own somatic landscape and labeled them unsafe.
And if we examine the underlying physical logic here, the text explains it as a pressure differential, right?
Yeah. Maintaining the psychological and physical wall to hold back the unfelt pain takes an enormous amount of daily life force energy. You are acting as a full-time border guard in your own mind.
A border guard. That's such a striking image.
And eventually, the wall itself becomes the primary problem, because maintaining that compression state is actually far more exhausting and disruptive to your daily life than the original feeling itself would be. The fear of the pain grows larger and more monstrous than the actual pain.
You know, I am really struggling with this part, just thinking about how this applies practically.
Okay, how so?
Well, if I put myself in the shoes of someone listening who has spent years actively trying to fix their issues, like reading the self-help books, journaling every morning, going to therapy for half a decade to analyze their childhood, why does the text imply they might still be stuck?
That's a great question.
Because if I can perfectly narrate my past, if I know exactly which dynamic with my parents created my avoidant attachment style, hasn't that solved the problem?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't figuring out the why the entire point of doing the work?
It feels like it should be, right?
Yeah.
We live in a highly intellectual culture that tells us that if we can name a problem, we've conquered it. But the source material draws a hard, definitive line between intellect and biology.
Okay, break that down.
The intellectual response to pain is to analyze it, to categorize it, and to make meaning of it. And while cognitive understanding is genuinely useful for providing context, understanding is not processing.
Wait, really? Understanding is not processing.
No, it's not. You can perfectly narrate your trauma with precise, appropriate clinical language, and your physical tissue can still hold the exact same electrical charge it did on the day the event happened.
Oh, so it's like reading the entire unabridged instruction manual for a bicycle.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you can memorize the physics of balance, you can know exactly how the gears shift, and you can explain torque perfectly to someone else.
Yeah.
You possess total intellectual mastery over the concept of the bicycle.
Right.
But knowing the mechanics doesn't mean your body actually knows how to balance when you get on the seat. The cognitive understanding doesn't translate into physical integration.
That is the perfect analogy, because the somatic circuit, the part of your nervous system that actually integrates and metabolizes lived experience,
Yeah.
it operates entirely below the level of language and narrative.
It's totally separate.
Completely.
Yes.
It operates through the actual felt sense of the present moment. All of your brilliant insight, all your psychological detective work is running on a completely different circuit than the one where the pain actually lives. Feeling your feelings is a physical act. Feeling is not thinking about feeling.
So if processing isn't analyzing, how do we actually release this trapped energy? The text describes the mechanics of this release in a way that honestly surprised me.
How so?
Well, it's not necessarily this huge, dramatic, cinematic breakdown where you're sobbing on the floor or screaming into a pillow. The process is remarkably quiet.
Yeah. The culture has really conditioned us to expect catharsis to look like a thunderstorm. But real processing is much quieter and much slower. It is simply the radical decision to stop moving around the pain.
Just stopping.
Yeah. It involves bringing gentle, incredibly specific attention to the physical sensation in your body when something true comes close. It's noticing the sudden tightening in your chest or the heat in your throat and just staying with it.
Without running away.
Exactly, without immediately deploying your intellect to explain it away or minimize it.
The source brings up the concept of the window of tolerance, which explains exactly how to stay with it.
Yeah.
Because there is a sweet spot for this kind of work, right? You don't want to just drown in it.
Right. The window of tolerance is the biological prerequisite for integration. On one side of the window, you are in a state of hypoarousal.
Hypoarousal, meaning too low.
Yes. You are too far away from the pain. You're detached, numb, intellectualizing, basically managing the memory from a safe distance.
Got it.
On the other side, you are in hyperarousal. You're too close. You are flooded, panicked, overwhelmed, essentially re-traumatizing your nervous system rather than processing the event.
That sounds dangerous.
It's definitely not helpful. Real processing requires navigating your way inside the window, remaining present enough to actually feel the somatic charge, but regulated enough to observe it without being consumed by it.
And when you manage to stay in that window, the text describes the moment of release beautifully. It says release is like an incomplete sentence that finally gets its period.
I love that line.
It's so good. It converts frozen history into an integrated past. You are basically unpausing the horror movie, realizing you are safe on your couch, and just letting the jump scare scene finish playing out until the credits roll.
Exactly, because feelings, when they are actually allowed to be felt without interruption, are finite. They move through the nervous system in a wave.
They don't last forever.
Right. The avoidance of the feeling is what creates a sensation that never ends, because the biological cycle never gets to complete. But when you sit with the sensation inside that window of tolerance, the biological signal is finally received by the brain. And once the body's signal is fully received, it doesn't need to keep transmitting that alarm at a blaring intensity.
So if the goal is just allowing that incomplete sentence to get its period, how do we provide the body with the right conditions to finally write that punctuation mark? Because the text stresses a really counterintuitive point. It says you aren't actually doing the healing.
Right.
The body already knows how to heal itself. Your only job is to get your intellect out of the way.
Yeah, the intelligence that completes and metabolizes experience never left you. It's just been overridden. To let it resume its natural function, the nervous system requires highly specific conditions.
Okay, what are those conditions?
It needs safety, which looks different for everyone, and it needs self-compassion. Now, the text emphasizes that this isn't about performing positive affirmations in a mirror.
No forced positivity.
Exactly. It's about extending genuine, warm accompaniment to your own physical distress, the same way you would sit with a frightened animal.
The text also heavily emphasizes breath and slowness. But I really want to dig into the mechanics of that because we hear, take a deep breath. So often it sounds like a cliche.
Oh, for sure.
How does the act of breathing actually facilitate this release?
Well, it all comes down to the vagus nerve and biomechanical signaling. When you're in a trauma response, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, which signals your amygdala that you're in danger, keeping the defensive walls up. When you intentionally slow your breathing, particularly extending your exhales, you are mechanically stimulating the vagus nerve.
Mechanically stimulating it.
Yes. This sends a direct biological signal to your brainstem that the environment is currently safe. You are literally overriding the threat response from the bottom up.
That is incredible.
And this requires slowness. The nervous system operates on a glacial timeline compared to the speed of our thoughts. Rushing the process or trying to optimize your healing on a schedule is just another sneaky form of avoidance.
This leads to a concept that just completely shifted my perspective on this entire topic. For you listening, this is the profound implication of doing this work. This process of staying with the pain isn't just about feeling better or emptying a backlog of childhood wounds.
No, it's much bigger than that.
The text argues that doing this actually upgrades your relationship with the truth. It's an epistemological upgrade.
Yes. The text posits that the body is the primary organ of truth perception. The body's biological signal always precedes the mind's interpretation.
It knows before we do.
Long before your prefrontal cortex has time to manufacture a comfortable narrative or engage in motivated reasoning to protect your ego, your body has already registered a visceral response to the reality of a situation. That somatic response is pure, unfiltered data.
To put an analogy to this, it's like you're sitting in a car and the radio is playing nothing but loud, irritating static. That's the unprocessed pain.
Right.
So you turn the volume dial all the way down to 0 to survive the drive.
Yeah.
But by turning down the volume to avoid the static, you've also completely muted the emergency broadcast system and the GPS navigation and the incoming calls from your family. When we numb the pain, we aren't just blocking the bad stuff, we are actively breaking our own inner compass.
That is a brilliant way to put it, because the neurobiology of numbing is nonspecific. When you condition yourself to override a somatic signal in one area, like clamping down on your jaw to shut down grief, you interfere with the reception of the body's quieter communications across the board.
You numb your intuition.
You lose access to the gut feelings that tell you a situation is dangerous or that a career path is fundamentally wrong for you. But when you develop the capacity to stay inside that window of tolerance with uncomfortable feelings, you restore the volume dial. Your inner compass comes back online.
Which means this brave, incredibly quiet work of simply feeling your physical sensations actually makes you harder to manipulate in the real world.
It creates a profound functional freedom. You stop gaslighting yourself. Because your somatic reception is clear, you can finally feel the tangible, physical difference between what you actually desire and what society or your family or your industry told you to want.
Wow.
You can feel the distinct physiological difference between who you truly are and who you've been performing yourself to be for the sake of safety. Facing pain isn't just a therapeutic exercise to make you comfortable. It is the mechanism by which you reclaim your own reality.
It is stunning to realize that the numbness we deploy to survive our most difficult moments is the exact same numbness that keeps us confused and lost in our daily lives.
Dissolving that numbness brings us to the ultimate realization of what lies on the other side of this work.
The journey we've mapped out today completely flips the script on how we manage our internal worlds. The pain you've been so desperately protecting yourself from, the feelings you've built entire architectures of routine to avoid, they are not waiting to destroy you.
No, they aren't.
They are simply waiting to be witnessed by you, in your own body, without the narrative, without the management, just pure regulated presence. You unpause the movie, you let the scene play out, the biological cycle completes, and the incomplete sentences of your past finally get their periods.
As we close, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. Building on the text's assertion that the maintenance of that defensive wall takes an enormous amount of daily metabolic energy,
A huge amount.
I want you to consider your own life and ask yourself, if you were to finally let the incomplete sentences of your past get their periods, what entirely new capacities, what new desires, or what dormant creative forces might suddenly emerge?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Because right now, you cannot possibly know what you are truly capable of, simply because so much of your life force energy is busy manning the walls of your own defense. What becomes possible for you when all that energy is finally returned to your control?
That is the defining question. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the mind, the body, and the quiet courage it takes to finally feel. Before you step back into the rush of your day, take one slow, full breath. Notice the physical weight of your body in the chair. We will catch you on the next deep dive.